Well, hello there, and welcome back to my channel. I am Nakiyoyumushi, and this is the third video in my series using Wearingeul Inks and creating an illustration based off the classic literature piece for which it is named. Last month was Romeo and Juliet, so if you like this video, maybe watch that one after this one. This month is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, quite possibly my favorite story of all time. As you are already seeing from the intro to this video, I have many books and iterations of this iconic story. I have Lewis Carroll's complete works, I have the Annotated Alice, those actually helped me in creating the illustration. I also have random Alice merchandise around my place of residence, and I was one of the Tweedles in a production of Alice in Wonderland that I loved oh so very much. No, I will not show you pictures, mainly because I cannot find them. I also have some tarot cards in this amazing book my nephew bought for me that you're seeing right now. I am sure you are familiar with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There is, of course, the iconic Disney version, one of my favorite rides at Disneyland. And there have been other film adaptations. My personal favorite is the 1999 version directed by Nick Willing. Part of the reason I love that adaptation so much is the puppets created by Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Maybe that's why I love Labyrinth so much, you know, with David Bowie. It's like a 1980s Alice in Wonderland. The common thread in most adaptations of Alice in Wonderland is they mix both Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there. And from now on in the video, I'm just gonna say Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass because it's a lot of words with those titles, respectfully. I honestly don't mind that the films do that so much. I mean, I would prefer if they were a little bit more true to form, but what makes Alice in Wonderland so iconic is that it really embodies childhood. A child's creative consciousness without any rules. It's nonsense in the most magical way. We lose that as adults. This idea that possibilities are endless and the belief that we can create anything we imagine. I like to live my life like Alice, boldly and never limiting myself. I am an adult though, so it's a little bit hard to retain that, but we fight on. Alice goes through every gambit of emotion, but she remains fully herself. The first draft of Alice was called Alice's Adventures Underground, and Lewis Carroll, real quick, Lewis Carroll was his pen name. It was actually Charles Ludwig Dodson. Alice in Wonderland was conceived on a golden afternoon on July 4th, 1862. Lewis Carroll and the Reverend Robinson Duckworth rowed up the Isis River with Henry Little's 3 daughters. So Lorena Charlotte, who was 13, Alice Pleasance, who was 10, and Edith Mary, who was 8. The preface of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland references these 3 girls in the poem, The Golden Afternoon. So Lorena is Prima, Alice is Secunda, and Edith is Tarita. 1, 2, 3. It's really, really great. In the introduction of the complete works of Lewis Carroll, Alexander Woolcott gives wonderful and enlightening sentiments about Lewis Carroll and quotes different letters from him. I would like to read one of those quotes from one of those letters by Lewis Carroll, but I am going to give you a warning. I might get a little bit emotional. It really shows why this story is so important for every single person who reads it and why it's honestly so important to me. So bear with me if I get emotional. Hey, Nakiyoyumushi is Night Rain Crybaby. I can't always be responsible for my actions. Lewis Carroll's case was stated in his own words in one comment on Alice. He wrote, quote, "The why of this book cannot and need not be put into words. Those for whom a child's mind is a sealed book, and who see no divinity in a child's smile would read such words in vain. While for anyone who has ever loved one true child, no words are needed. For he will have known the awe that falls on one in the presence of a spirit fresh from God's hands, on whom no shadow of sin, and but the outermost fringe of the shadow of sorrow has yet fallen. He will have felt the bitter contrast between the selfishness that spoils his best deeds and the life that is but an overflowing love. For I think a child's first attitude to the world is a simple love for all living things. And he will have learned that the best work a man can do is when he works for love's sake only, with no thought of fame or gain or earthly reward. No deed of ours, I suppose, on this side of the grave is really unselfish. Yet if one can put forth all one's powers in a task where nothing of reward is hoped for, but a little child's whispered thanks, and the airy touch of a little child's pure lips, one seems to come somewhere near to this. End quote. Yeah, that is just one of the most beautiful things I've ever read, and I did cut out the part where I started crying, because I'm a big girl and I don't want to waste your time. Anyway, many people have read meaning other than it being the true embodiment of childhood into Alice in Wonderland. I do not much care for those interpretations, let alone agree with them. There is, however, one source I would like to mention and quote. It's the 1928 commentary of Dr. Mark Edmund Jones, who was the founder of the Sabian Assembly, on Lewis Carroll's classical stories of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, illustrated by John Tenniel. The Sabian Assembly looks at self and how one relates self to the world around it. It's kind of a spiritual concept, if you will, but it's more of trying to understanding why am I here and what am I doing. And Dr. Edmund Jones' commentary is really brilliant on both of them, and he gives an amazing perspective. And since I literally happen to have 2 tarot decks, there is a little snippet I'd like to read from his Chapter 8 commentary. Here is the principle of intelligence. Conception or knowing is not the acquisition of precepts or the memorizing of the body or substance of the particular knowledge. It is a process of centering through which facts are related in essence to self. Thus, knowledge without intelligence or outer form is dangerous, whereas intelligence without knowledge or inner relationship is almost an anomaly, since intelligence can always gain and even create its knowledge. Achievement rather than experience is the justification for living, because achievement demands intelligence as latent if not consciously acting, while experience merely leads to knowledge. The symbolism of the 8th chapter of Alice is therefore interesting in showing how outer things assemble in representation of the inner reality. The painting of the roses with which the chapter opens is that poignant note first struck by Shakespeare's Paint the Lily in King John IV. It shows the attempt by man to control his circumstances, and it dominates his inherent realization that to do so is possible. All the characters here, except the few previously introduced, are playing cards. And the remarkable feature both of the familiar 52 card deck and the tarot is the manner in which they may be used by skillful operators in the divination of any condition of affairs, thanks to their readiness in assembling to represent this or that state of consciousness. If man may use or subject to his will such agency as playing cards to represent the condition and consciousness of the circumstances around him, obviously this manipulation of the representative medium proves the possibility of manipulation of the represented circumstances by showing the reality to lie in the consciousness. If the reality were in the object, it would be in the cards as objects of manipulation. It cannot be used to represent something other than themselves. Indeed, true divination is but objectification, and divination as seen conventionally in ordinary or everyday judgment is the only outer proof of intelligence aside from the eventual fruits of action. So before I give you one last little quote from this chapter commentary, let me just point out what he is saying in not so many fancy words is that how you feel on the inside is then represented by your outside circumstances. You create your reality. It starts with you and then goes out. So he goes on to end this chapter's commentary by saying, quote, "We see her most interestingly communing with her higher self, or the cat that cannot be beheaded. No injury or accident to man can reach his soul or real being. The student must learn to talk about it and bring out and present the circumstances of life for mastery. Silence is the rule for the within, as communion or talk with the inner self. But conversation as expression and committal of the self is social contact, and it remains eternally the rule for the without. So I guess the easiest way to kind of sum up what he just said is learn to talk about how you're feeling and what's going on within so you can figure out what to do about it. In case you cannot tell, my inspiration for this art piece comes from the last chapter when the cards envelop Alice and she wakes up. I liked the last page of the pop-up book especially. The movement really inspired me. And since we just spoke about cards, let me give you a mini tarot reading for the collective watching this video! Pulling 3 cards, past, present, and future. Past, 4 of Cups, present, 3 of Cups, and future, Strength. What I really like about this tarot guide is it uses the classic illustrations, and it also tells you if it was either from Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass, and it gives a pretty good interpretation. I like that for the 4 of Cups, it's the mock turtle, because the mock turtle is one of the saddest creatures in the text, and do you agree with that? It also gives a quote from the text. It says, "Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. 'What is his sorrow?' she asked the griffin, and the griffin answered very nearly in the same words as before. 'It's all his fancy that. He hasn't got no sorrow, you know.'" So then if we go back, there's a lot more stuff to read, but we're just doing a quick little interpretation here. Basically, after you read the whole thing, it says you cannot see any fresh possibilities even though they're right under your nose. This card does not indicate whether you shake this off or keep stewing, so it is completely your choice. Because at some point, you got sad and you just got in your head about it. So, in the past, you're sad and in your head. Now we go to the 3 of Cups. This card is that moment when you and your people, even though there are 3 in this image, it can really be any number, create an upward spiral of awesomeness. So in the past, you were holding on to something. I would assume you let it go, and now you've got people you love and you're having a party. Okay? It's great. There's muchness. So now we're moving on to Strength, which is your future, and Strength is a major arcana, so this can indicate a person or like a major life event. It says Alice is on her way to the 8th square where she will achieve her goal of being a queen. Even though the dark wood scares her, she goes through it because it is the only way to make it across the chessboard. In a reading, Strength tells us that to be truly strong means to understand others and not just tolerate, but accept them. Most creatures only lash out when scared or in pain. When we experience anger in others, it is normal to react in kind. But Strength says that we are not normal. We are able to be more than normal. We can react from that place of deep remembering that was revealed in the High Priestess, where we are one in all things. We can treat others the way we'd wish to be treated, to understand the way we'd wish to be understood. In other words, in the future, work on being kind. You got hurt in the past, but you've got good people around you now, so you keep the trajectory going upward. I think that's a lovely reading. And remember, my friend, only take what resonates with you, okay? Not every tarot reading is meant for every single person. But again, remember what we were talking about earlier? You create your reality. Understand yourself from within and allow it to flow out and create positivity in the life you want. The pictures are integral to Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. I would like to point out Alice's physical appearance is never fully described in the text, though her characteristics are. But Carroll worked closely with John Tenniel for how he wanted her to be drawn. And in the nursery Alice, 20 illustrations were colored, and Alice actually has a yellow dress with blue stockings and a blue bow, and her hair is light colored. This goes for many of the other characters as well. Carroll didn't fully describe their appearance in the text, much was left to Tenniel's imagination. Fun fact, Tenniel was a Pisces and Carroll was an Aquarius. If you know anything about zodiac signs, it only makes sense. It's funny reading how Carroll and Tenniel would converse about the illustrations. Tenniel was mainly a political cartoonist, and Alice was the only literary book he ever illustrated. My favorite chapter in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is the end of Chapter 9, the Mock Turtle story, and Chapter 10, the Lobster Quadrille. I do wonder, however, how much of this love is influenced by Nick Willing's film. I really love Gene Wilder in that, and then the puppet that they made for the Griffin. I also love in the book how Bill the Lizard is always seeming to get the short end of the stick. Like getting thrown out of the roof and then getting thrown out of the box and having the ink dumped on him. It's just really funny. I also really love Alice's conversation with the mouse before the caucus race, as she keeps on accidentally upsetting the mouse. My favorite character is, of course, the Cheshire Cat, though. Now that I've kind of given you enough random background information, you're welcome, I know that's what you come here for, I'm going to read the part when Alice leaves the Duchess's house until the end of the Mad Tea Party. Here we go! Here! You may nurse it a bit if you like, the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen! And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went out, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature and held its arms and legs in all directions. Just like a starfish, thought Alice. The poor thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether, for the first minute or two, it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made out the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up in a sort of knot and then keep tight hold of its right ear and left foot so as to prevent its undoing itself, she carried it out into the open air. If I don't take this child with me, thought Alice, they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder if I leave it behind? She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. It had left off sneezing at this time. Don't grunt, said Alice. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself. The baby grunted again. Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what was the matter with it. There could be no doubt that it had a very turn-up nose, much more like a snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. Altogether, Alice did not like the look of the thing at all. But perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and looked into its eyes again to see if there were any tears. No, there were no tears. If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, said Alice seriously, I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now! The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted, it was impossible to say which, and they went on for some while in silence. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, now, what am I going to do with this creature when I get it home? When it grunted again so violently that she looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig. And she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it further. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved when she saw it trot away quietly into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child. But it makes a rather handsome pig, I think. And she began thinking over other children she knew who might do very well as pigs, and was just saying to herself, if one only knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began, rather timidly, as she did not at all know whether it would like the name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Come, it's pleased so far, thought Alice, and she went on. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. So long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough. Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live about here? In that direction, the cat said, waving its right paw round, lives a hatter. And in that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad. How do you know I'm mad? Said Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. Alice didn't think that proved it at all. However, she went on. And how do you know that you're mad? To begin with, said the cat, a dog's not mad. You grant that? I suppose so, said Alice. Well then, the cat went on, you see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad. I call it purring, not growling, said Alice. Call it what you like, said the cat. Do you play croquet with the Queen today? I should like it very much, said Alice, but I haven't been invited yet. You'll see me there, said the cat, and vanished. Alice was not much surprised at this. She was getting so used to queer things happening. While she was looking at the place where it had been, it suddenly appeared again. By the by, what became of the baby? Said the cat. I'd nearly forgotten to ask. It turned into a pig, Alice quietly said, just as if it had come back in a natural way. I thought it would, said the cat, and vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear, and after a minute or two she walked on in the direction in which the March hare was said to live. I've seen hatters before, she said to herself. The March hare will be much the more interesting, and perhaps, as this is May, it won't be raving mad. At least not so mad as it was in March. As she said this, she looked up, and there was the cat again, sitting on a branch of a tree. Did you say pig or fig? Said the cat. I said pig, replied Alice, and I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddy. All right, said the cat, and this time it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of its tail and ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. Well, I have often seen a cat without a grin, thought Alice, but a grin without a cat? It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life. She had not gone much farther before she came in sight of the house of the March hare. She thought it must be the right house because the chimneys were shaped like ears and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go nearer till she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom and raised herself to about 2 feet high. Even then she walked up towards it rather timidly, saying to herself, Suppose it should be raving mad after all. I almost wish I'd gone to see the hatter instead. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March hare and the hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them fast asleep, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it and talking over its head. Very uncomfortable for the dormouse, thought Alice. Only, as it's asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind. The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it. No room! No room! They cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. Have some wine, the March hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all round the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine, she remarked. There isn't any, said the March hare. Then it wasn't wasn't very civil of you to offer it, said Alice angrily.
It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited, said the March Hare.
I didn't know it was your table, said Alice. It's laid for a great many more than 3.
Your hair wants cutting, said the Hatter.
He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech.
You should learn not to make personal remarks, said Alice with some severity. It's very rude.
The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was,
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Come, we shall have some fun now, thought Alice. I'm glad they've begun asking riddles.
I believe I can guess that, she added aloud.
Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it? Said the March Hare. Exactly so, said Alice.
Then you should say what you mean,
the March Hare went on.
I do, Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say.
That's the same thing, you know.
Not the same thing a bit, said the Hatter. You might just as well say, I see what I eat is the same as I eat what I see.
You might as well say,
added the March Hare, that I like what I get is the same as I get what I like.
You might as well say,
added the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in his sleep,
that I breathe when I sleep is the same as I sleep when I breathe.
It is the same thing with you, said the Hatter, and here the conversation dropped.
And the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence.
What day of the month is it?
He said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it every now and then and holding it to his ear. Alice considered a little and then said, The 4th.
2 days wrong, sighed the Hatter. I told you butter wouldn't suit the works, he added, looking angrily at the March Hare.
It was the best butter,
the March Hare meekly replied. Yes, but some crumbs must have got in it as well, the Hatter grumbled. You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife.
The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily. Then he dipped it into his cup of tea and looked at it again. But he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark.
It was the best butter, you know.
Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. What a funny watch, she remarked. It tells the day of the month, and it doesn't tell what o'clock it is.
Why should it? Muttered the Hatter. Does your watch tell you what year it is?
Of course not, Alice replied very readily. But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together.
Which is just the case with mine, said the Hatter.
Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly English. I don't quite understand you, she said as politely as she could.
The Dormouse is asleep again, said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said without opening its eyes,
Of course, just what I was going to remark myself.
Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said, turning to Alice again.
No, I give it up, Alice replied. What's the answer?
I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter.
Nor I,
said the March Hare. Alice sighed wearily.
I think you might do something better with your time, she said, than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers.
If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him.
I don't know what you mean, said Alice.
Of course you don't, the Hatter said, tossing his head contemptuously. I dare say you never even spoke to time.
Perhaps not, Alice cautiously replied. But I know I have to beat time when I learn music.
Ah! That accounts for it, said the Hatter. He won't stand beaten. Now, if you only get on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you like with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning. Just time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner. I only wish it was, the March Hare said to itself in a whisper.
That would be grand, certainly, said Alice thoughtfully. But then I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know.
Not at first, perhaps, said the Hatter, but you could keep it to 1:30 as long as you liked. Is that the way you manage? Alice asked. The Hatter shook his head mournfully. Not I, he replied. We quarrelled last March. Just before he went mad, you know, pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare. It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, oh, I wonder what you're at. You know the song, perhaps? I've heard something like it, said Alice. It goes on, you know, the Hatter continued, in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep. Twinkle, 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 twinkle. And went on for so long that they had to pinch it to make it stop. Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse, said the Hatter, when the Queen jumped up and bawled out, He's murdering the time! Off with his head! How dreadfully savage! Exclaimed Alice. And ever since that, the Hatter went on in a mournful tone, He won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now. A bright idea came into Alice's head. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? She asked. Yes, that's it, said the Hatter with a sigh. It's always tea time. We've no time to wash the things between whiles. Then you keep moving round, I suppose? Said Alice. Exactly so, said the Hatter, as things get used up. But what happens when you come to the beginning again? Alice ventured to ask. Suppose we change the subject, the March Hare interrupted, yawning. I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tells us a story. I'm afraid I don't know one, said Alice, rather alarmed at the proposal. Then the Dormouse shall, they both cried. Wake up, Dormouse! And they pinched it on both sides at once. The Dormouse slowly opened his eyes. I wasn't asleep, he said in a hoarse, feeble voice. I heard every word you fellows were saying. Tell us a story, said the March Hare. Yes, please do, pleaded Alice. And be quick about it, added the Hatter, or you'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time there were 3 little sisters, the Dormouse began in a great hurry, and their names were Elsie, Lacey and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well. What did they live on? Said Alice, who always took a great interest in questions of eating and drinking. They lived on treacle, said the Dormouse after thinking a minute or two. They couldn't have done that, you know, Alice gently remarked. They'd have been ill. So they were, said the Dormouse. Very ill. Alice tried to fancy to herself what such an extraordinary ways of living would be like, but it puzzled her too much, so she went on. But why did they live at the bottom of a well? Take some more tea, the March Hare said to Alice very earnestly. I've had nothing yet, Alice replied in an offended tone. So I can't take more. You mean you can't take less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. Nobody asked your opinion, said Alice. Who's making personal remarks now? The Hatter asked triumphantly. Alice did not quite know what to say to this, so she helped herself to some tea and bread and butter, and then turned to the Dormouse and repeated her question. Why did they live at the bottom of a well? The Dormouse again took a minute or two to think about it, and then said, It was a treacle well. There's no such thing! Alice was beginning very angrily, but the Hatter and the March Hare went, Shh, shh, and the Dormouse sulkily remarked, If you can't be civil, you'd better finish the story for yourself. No, please go on, Alice said very humbly. I won't interrupt again. I dare say there may be one. One indeed, said the Dormouse indignantly. However, he consented to go on. And so, these 3 little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know. What did they draw? Said Alice, quite forgetting her promise. Treacle, said the Dormouse, without considering it all this time. I want a clean cup, interrupted the Hatter. Let's all move one place on. He moved as he spoke, and the Dormouse followed him. The March Hare moved into the Dormouse's place, and Alice rather unwillingly took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got any advantage from the change, and Alice was a good deal worse off than before, as the March Hare had just upset the milk jug into his plate. Alice did not wish to offend the Dormouse again, so she began very cautiously. But I don't understand. Where did they draw the treacle from?
You can draw water out of a water well, said the Hatter. So I think you can draw treacle out of a treacle well. Eh, stupid?
But they were in the well, Alice said to the Dormouse, not choosing to notice this last remark.
Course they were,
said the Dormouse.
Well, in.
This answer so confused poor Alice that she let the Dormouse go on for some time without interrupting it.
They were learning to draw,
the Dormouse went on, yawning and rubbing its eyes, for it was getting very sleepy.
And they drew all manner of things. Everything that begins with an M.
Why with an M? Said Alice.
Why not?
Said the March Hare. Alice was silent. The Dormouse had closed its eyes by this time and was going off into a doze. But, on being pinched by the Hatter, it woke again with a loud shriek and went on,
begins with an M, such as mouse traps and the moon and memory and muchness. You know, you say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness?
Really? Now you ask me, said Alice, very much confused. I don't think...
Then you shouldn't talk,
said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice, half hoping that they would call after her. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot.
At any rate, I'll never go there again, said Alice as she picked her way through the wood. It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life.
Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought, but everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once. And in she went. Once more she found herself in the long hall and close to the little glass table. Now I'll manage better this time, she said to herself, and began by taking the little golden key and unlocking the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket, till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. So what do you think? Alice's conversations are just delightful. I giggle every time I read them. And it looks like this illustration and video are both finished. I could not be happier with this result. The added touch for the final print, I put the original text and some of the original illustrations around it. It was actually a happy accident. I measured incorrectly. But I find it all too fitting due to the fact that you cannot have the text without the pictures. I will be selling this print in my print club for June, as well as some stickers. $10 subscription to my Patreon gets you this print, a sticker, and a handwritten letter. $15 subscription gets 2 prints, multiple stickers, and the letter. You can sign up on my Patreon, link is here on the screen, in the description, and in my bio. I also have bonus content on my Patreon. The video for this month will be explaining how I made this lovely art piece right here, featuring my dogs Tintin and Brutus. I also explain how my measurements went so wonky, and I give you some encouraging tips when things like that happen. Hint for next month's illustration, it's a movie coming out in the month of July. Before I hop off here, I have just one more thing I want to say. Never lose that childlike wonder. This life is really beautiful, and every time I read Alice in Wonderland, I'm reminded why I feel so blessed to be around here. I recently went camping for the first time in my life a couple weekends ago, and I was frolicking and running through the forest thinking it was the best thing on this planet. And it really was. But we end up taking ourselves too seriously, and we really don't need to do that. I'm also a very firm believer that we know who we are as children. It's just time and how we're raised and the environment that we're in, and even society that tries to convince us otherwise. We get caught up in bills and doing this and doing that and having to be responsible.
I personally prefer the books with pictures in them. And I prefer the books that paint pictures in your head and allow you to explore who you are. I have known ever since I was young that I wanted to be an artist. I became afraid as I grew up that I wouldn't be able to do it. And here I am, 30 years old, hearkening back to 5-year-old Nakio Yumushi and her absolute and utter and entire confidence that even if hell freezes over, she was going to be an artist. So let's be like Alice. Let's be curious. Let's be confident. Let's go through every single emotion, and at the end of the day, end up being ourselves in our much of muchness. I love you, and I'll see you on the next one.